Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are once again in my bedroom because I cannot get my shit together to get my shelves to look nice. Sorry, it'll happen someday. That day is just not today. But today I thought we would do a monthly wrap up. I know there's still about a week left, but I started a chunkosaurus of a book, and that is When the Moon Hatched. So I just kind of decided I'd wrap things up now because I don't really want to try and rush through it, and I don't think I'll finish it in the week. So I'm just gonna film this video now. I didn't get a whole lot of reading done this month. I kind of mostly listened to audiobooks while I was at work. I tend to not rush through my books. I really like to just enjoy them and savor them. If I'm really enjoying a book, I like to put off finishing it because you know how you get that hollow feeling after you finish a really good book and then you try to start a new book and it just doesn't feel the same? That's how I always feel. So I was just like, I don't want to finish it because it'll just leave this void that nothing else can fill. And then you finally get over it in a week and you finally pick up a new book. But anyway, let's move on before this video turns into an hour from me rambling. The first one I read was Dreadful. I enjoyed the fuck out of this one. This one was hilarious. And I gotta say, the character development in it is actually really good. So this was about a villain. He is in his like mid 30s, 40s, middle-aged guy, just doesn't know what the fuck he's doing in life. He basically woke up without memories, doesn't know what he did to lose them, and he kind of slowly discovers that he is this evil overlord. He has all these henchmen that are goblins, and he kidnapped a princess, and he has no memories of it, and he is in cahoots with these other Dark Lord wizards, and they have like this grand scheme of things, and he has no memory of it, no idea what's happening. And he actually kind of decides that as he's trying to piece his memory together and seeing the reactions of people to him, that he doesn't like being evil anymore. He wants to be good, he wants to change. And I think the development for this character actually worked really well. Um, it is a bit slow. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. If you like action-packed, very fast-moving stories, then I don't think you'd enjoy this one. This one is very heavily character-driven. It did kind of like slow down and drag a little bit in the middle of the book, but it did pick up again, and I am highly satisfied with the ending. If you do not like romance, like if you are so tired of romance, I recommend picking this one up because there's no romance, no smut, and they don't get together at the end. I mean, they kind of do, but not romantically. It was more out of like necessity as an apprentice. But I really like this one. It deals with a lot of interesting topics, like changing, not just like changing yourself as a person, but the way he interacts with the other characters. Like he goes through a lot of preconceived biases. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, when he was evil, he didn't care or think about other people. He had these preconceived ideas of them. Like, he had these very preconceived ideas of what the goblins were like, how he thinks they should look and speak and everything like that. And he kind of takes a double take on how he treats women, interacts with them, and how he overall sees them. And I thought the way this book dealt with it did it in a really good way. And I like that at the end of the book, he doesn't suddenly become the hero, but he's not a villain either. He's just a guy. And I really like this because the princess holds him accountable for his actions. There's so many stories where it's like, oh, they have amnesia, and then it's like they've kind of been like people just like forgive them magically for all the things they've done because they're like, oh, well, you're a new person now. But the princess kind of like holds him accountable for what he did, and she's like, you can't change that. You have to own it, even if you don't remember it. And so he's just working to be a better person, and basically he's not like he doesn't magically turn into the good guy. He's not the hero. In the end, he's just a guy, and I like that because then he can just make a new start from himself. But he's not like, you know, magically eviscerated of everything he's done. And I think it's really funny, the comedy in this. There's like a lot of like kind of like RPG shenanigans. Like if you're playing a D&D campaign, they have like the heroes dress up to like sneak into his castle and stuff in like these funny cartoony kind of ways, or just, you know, that stupid shit that like your D&D group likes to do where they're like, oh, we'll do this stupid thing to get into this castle. There's a lot of shenanigans like that in this. That's really funny. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I highly recommend it, especially if you like character heavy stories and great character development. The next one I read is Among the Briars. This one was just a short YA novel. I really liked it. It wasn't like, you know, too heavy or anything. It was easy to get through. This is basically about a girl who has what they call the wood curse. This is basically the back lore of this story is basically there is this forest goddess. She made a pact with this kingdom to give him this crown, and then like the power of the forest disappeared and it became cursed, and then basically the old gods and stuff turned into these monsters, and if you get caught with them in the woods, they'll curse you. And so basically when she was playing around as a kid, she ended up in the woods and she got wood cursed. But she kind of survives the curse, has like this magic kind of power. No one really knows why. And it's not really ever explained either towards the end, but that's okay because it's not really relevant. But it was a really good story, and stuff happened with like the princess and stuff, and I don't know if I should say anything about it without spoiling the story, but she basically has to go and save the kingdom because the coronation goes wrong from the wood curse, and they have to find this mystical town, which was the town that they originally got the crown from, and no one's traveled to it in a long time, so they don't know if it still exists, if it's there, if it's as magical as they thought it was, and they basically have to try and break the curse. And I thought it was a really good quick read. The ending kind of upset me a little bit because they do a time skip after they break the curse, and I really would have liked it if they described what had happened rather than doing a skip forward and then being like, oh, this is what happened. I don't know, I don't like when stories do that. I feel like it's a cop-out, you know? But oh, I like this one. It had a nice, quick, whimsical feel to it. This one I actually finished last night, and this is Nothing. I did not like this book. This was like the Danish version of Lord of the Flies. And I swear to God, this just got an award because it was shock factory. Like, this is, I think it's supposed to be middle grade because the main characters are in like 7th grade. But like, there's a lot of heavy content in this that I don't really know where they were trying to go with it. This is supposed to be like, I think the author said it was kind of trying to, I can't remember in the back notes. They said it's supposed to be gradually consuming corrode. It's like supposed to, it's like societal corrosion over like obsessing over things, but I don't think it did a very good job of showing or describing that. And I'm gonna get spoiler with this because I do not think it's worth reading, and I do not care if I spoil it for you because there's a lot in this book. That's just one thing I didn't like is the story writing. Even for a middle grade book, it is very minimalistic. There is no description at all. So it's like, why should I care about anything that's happening when it's not telling me why I need to care about what's happening? So basically, the story for this is that there's this kid who sits up in this tree, and he is very pessimistic. He thinks life is pointless, and he'll like sit up in this tree and yell at people walking by. He'll throw like plums and stuff at them and just be like, oh, life sucks, you guys are gonna hate it, and your lives mean nothing. And so they decide one day that they're going to prove to him that there is meaning in life. And so they decide to do this by making a pile of meaningful things, but it's ironically a non-meaningful pile of things because they take random shit that this is the thing. It doesn't describe why these things had meaning to these people. It just and the thing too is that they started demanding things of other people, what they think is meaning or what should be meaningful, but they don't describe again why that's meaningful. And then they just start taking random shit, and it's like, and when I say this is heavy for a middle grade book, these kids do some really fucked up things. Like, and this is the thing, how this was meaningful, I don't know. They dug up one of the kids' baby brother's grave. Yeah, they went to the graveyard, and she didn't care. This is the thing, these kids are kind of sociopathic. Like, she didn't care. The narrator describes her as not caring that they're digging up her grave, didn't even care that they died to begin with, didn't care. So I'm just like, why are you digging up this grave as a meaningful thing when this character doesn't even seem to care? And then they're like, there's this dog up there that is honor bound to their owner that died. So it just sits up there on the grave. And so it follows them back and they get mad about it. And later in the book, they cut off this dog's head. No real reason. They're just like, and they don't even care. One character cared. They cried, I guess. But one kid was just like, I want that dog's head. Why? He didn't even say why. He was just like, just because. What happened to this book being about me? And then they stole like a cross from a church because one of the kids was religious. And then they took one Muslim kid's prayer mat. And of course, this kid gets the shit beaten out of him by his dad because, you know, the stereotype of Middle Eastern people are all abusive towards their kid because, you know, why not? Granted, this was written in the 2000s, so like, what do I expect? But still, it's kind of like, and then they're like, they didn't even describe it, like, stuff isn't explicit, but you know when you hear, I want someone's innocence, especially a girl's, you know exactly what that's referring to. So they just have sex, basically just kind of essays this girl, because, you know, meaning, I guess. And then she wants to chop off one guy's finger because meaning, I guess. And then book, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous it gets. Especially because it escalates so quickly. There's not like this build up to it. And as I'm like describing it, it's like, because it started out with someone's braids and their sandals, and then they were collecting things from like old people, like roses and stuff, to just suddenly being like, we're gonna cut off a dog's head. And it's like, I don't know. It's just so absurd. And then like they find out that they finally get the pile, and they're like, you have to come see it. And he's like, no, because none of that means anything. And then they get like so pissed off because he's like, it's just junk, it doesn't mean anything. And then the cops finally find it, and then they're like, wow, this is super fucked up, who would do this, you know? And then the kids get found out, and then there's like no repercussions for them. 2 of them got beaten by their parents and put in the hospital, and then the rest are just grounded. Like, what? And then they get like, they're like mad at this kid for not looking at the pile, and they're like, we're gonna call the newspaper and we're going to tell him about this, but we're gonna do it anonymously, and so it'll become this huge newsworthy thing, and then he'll have to come and look at it, which make the logic make sense. I guess they're 7th graders, it doesn't have to make sense, but like, this is where it gets weird to me, because I guess the group of people, once the news gets out about it, they're kind of like mixed between, wow, this is a really fucked up thing, and then being like, oh wow, this is a work of inspirational art that these kids did. And I'm like, that's like looking at the Zodiac Killer's stuff and being like, oh, those little symbols he drew, that was just an expression of art. Like, let's remind these people, there's a dead corpse of a child sitting on the top of this pile, and a corpse of a dog and a severed dog head on top, and a missing finger, and the blood from someone's virginity up there. I don't. And then they get like this offer from like an American art institute that's like, this is a beautiful work of art, we want to buy it. And they're like, oh my god, yeah, let's sell it. And then they go and talk to the guy again about how that he needs to come and see the pile before it disappears. And then he like just tells them, no, it's useless trash, it's not worth anything. And then they get mad at him again, and he's like, if it was worth something, like, you wouldn't have sold it, you just sold like your body and your stuff and all this shit you did. And this is the thing that annoys me too, is that there's no regret for anything they did, any of it. And so they finally just get so pissed off over this kid, and they had this junk pile like hidden in the mill. And this is where things turn Lord of the Flies real fast. They start beating the shit out of each other because they're all just mad and pissed off. And the main character, I guess, the narrator, gets up in the middle of the fight and is like, oh my god, I have to show the kid this fight, because I guess that has meaning. So they run to the kid's house, try to get him out of the tree, and they're like, you gotta come see this fight, everyone's lost their mind. And suddenly, magically, he's like, yeah, okay. So he finally gets out of the tree, goes to the sawmill, tells everyone off about how meaningless all their shit was, how they just sold themselves, how they were so obsessive. And then they all freak out and they beat the shit out of this kid. They beat him to death. They broke his neck. And then they lit the sawmill on fire. And And they very briefly like kind of talk about how they were trying to explain it to the police on what the body looked like before, but they didn't really mention it because you know you'd get in trouble. And it just like, I don't know, it's really weird. And then the ending chapter, they're at this kid's funeral and they're not even thinking about it. No remorse, no regret for what they did. They're just like, yeah, that's a thing that happened. And literally the main character's just thinking about how nice the fucking flowers on his grave looks as they're lowering down his coffin. And I'm like, not a single inch of remorse for any of the shit they did. And they never got in trouble. Any of it. Not a single repercussion. I'm just like, what the fuck did I just read? This is wild for a 7th grade book. And I don't think, like, you know, 7th graders, I know when I was that age, I was reading heavy topics, right? Because that's how we learn to cope when we get to adulthood with certain topics. But I don't feel like they were done well in this book at all. And I almost feel like it kind of leaves a bad message. And since this was trying to be philosophical and like thought-provoking, there's like no moral implication. And usually I'm like, books aren't moral compasses, right? You have critical thinking skills, you can come up with your own conclusions, but I feel like if you're trying to drive like some kind of narrative like that, you need to put it in there and do it well. Because I just finished the book and was like, what was the point of any of that? Like, what was the message? The message was supposed to be about finding meaning in things and the over obsession about it, but it was just never addressed at the end. And these kids, they just, because you would think that they would sit back and think at this kid's funeral about everything that they'd done and the obsession they went through, but they don't. And they don't even care that they killed this kid. It's wild. And I think the thing that annoyed me too is that in the end they were blaming this kid for why all this happened and why they beat the shit out of him. And it's like, you decided to do this yourself. You made that decision yourself. He did not tell you to go and find the meaning of life or the meaning of your shit. You did that yourself. That was your idea. You're the one who wanted to do that. I don't know. I didn't get it. I did not enjoy it. If you're thinking about reading this, I would recommend skipping it and picking up something else, especially if you're like sensitive to like animal abuse and like bodily violence. I'm trying to think of like what else. SA, like, it's not descriptive at all, but it's just so blunt about the topic that it's just kind of weird and a little jarring. So I don't know. That was that one. Another one I read was Mr. Magic. This was also one I didn't really enjoy, which is upsetting because I was really enjoying it at the beginning, and then it just really dropped off in the middle. It just got really dull, really slow. I didn't think the story was making sense. And then the ending was just really lame. Like, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's basically like there's this kids show from like the 80s, and it was like this obscure kind of cult-like TV show, and apparently something happened and it was taken off the air, and basically the main characters are the cast that was on that show, and it was kind of like this fringe cult classic. Not a lot of people know about it, but there are people that kind of like remember it, but they're like, oh yeah, we can't find anything about it anywhere. And it's like, oh, that's kind of intriguing. And it had these spots where it's like this, where it'd have like little social media inserts where it's like people talking about it, and it was really cool. Like added to that intrigue of like why it disappeared and how people remembered it differently. And it was really interesting, but like the execution of it was just not good, and it was really boring. Just nothing really happened. They basically got together and they went to this house where I guess the show was originally filmed in, and they were going to do like this podcast interview for like a reunion kind of thing. And I don't know how to describe it without spoiling it, but like there's like this magic power, of course, because in the middle of Utah, so it's like this. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's just, and I think the saddest thing about this book is that it was supposed to be based off of the author's religious trauma, which I wouldn't have known about if I didn't read the acknowledgments in the back. I would never have made that connection from reading this. There's like a giant fuck you to religion in the back, and I was just like, please make it make sense on how this has anything to do with that. Because I guess this is supposed to be like a connection to Latter-day Saints, which I do not see at all. I was like trying to put the dots together and I just couldn't, because Latter-day Saints will ostracize you if you do something bad, and they will find ways to, basically they will cut you off. They will cut you off. If they do not like you, they will excommunicate you and never speak to you again. This felt more like Christianity because there is kind of like a little cult in it. Where, but they welcome her back and they're like, oh, welcome back. We still love you. You can still fix the problem. And that does not scream Latter-day Saints to me. Like, not at all. And the thing is, like, so, like, okay, the story is basically, like I said, a kid's show. And you know how every kid's show has like that adult figure that kind of leads the kids around. The leader's name is Mr. Magic. And apparently, Mr. Magic is like secretly this bad guy, but he definitely doesn't feel like it. He just does things that are like normal. Like the lessons feel normal. Like reprimanding you when you did something bad, or like they're like mad because they're like, oh, he ruined my creativity. He would say something if we got too insanely creative, which I mean kind of made sense because they're using like this magical god ability thing from this house, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because like kids, while it's good that they have an imagination, they still need to be grounded in reality. And it just, I don't know, it didn't really make sense. They're like trying to make him out as a bad guy, but he just didn't feel like one. And then the main characters, like, they were supposed to end the show. They were supposed to end Mr. Magic, but they don't at all. And the main character just turns into Mr. Magic at the end. And they're like, I'm gonna let the kids do whatever they want. I'm gonna be a better Mr. Magic. And it's just like, but the other one wasn't really like that bad. I didn't get it. And I didn't see the correlation to like Latter-day Saints or anything like that. It just, or any religion really, it just didn't. And then most of the time they're just sitting at this house bullshitting or whining about things. And it just, I don't know. It sounded good at first because the main character didn't have any memory of this kids show, so it sounded really good. And it was really intriguing at first because she didn't have her memory. And then the book starts off with her dad dying, and she finds out that he lied to her about everything and she had no memory. And these guys show up at her father's funeral, and so she's like, oh yeah, I'll go with you guys to this reunion so I can remember what happened, because I don't remember it. But it just really, I don't know, it just is really meh. And I looked up the reviews for it, and I'm really glad because I'm not the only one that felt mad about it. Apparently, this had really mixed reviews, which is really disappointing because I hear this author has really good books, but now I'm not really inclined to really pick up any of her other books. And the last things I read this month, these were a guilty pleasure read. Usually I don't really read a lot of romance or like smut, but this is the Filthy Rich Vampire series, and the fourth one just got released, and I think I'm gonna have to pick it up. And I'm kind of surprised I liked these because it's like not the best writing in the world, but I feel like they're entertaining and fast enough to get through that I enjoyed them for what they were. I wasn't so sure about the third book though. I feel like the story kind of went off in an odd direction. But this is basically about a girl who's into music and she's playing at like this fancy kind of rich people get together, and you can probably see where that's going. Vampires, rich people. And so that's where she meets the main vampire. He falls in love. There's like all the mates and stuff like that. And he's like, "Ah, you're my mate." And there's like a lot of drama. The one thing I don't quite like about this series is some of the concepts in it. They'll make a very big deal about some of the stuff and then just drop it later and act like it's nothing. Like, he made a big deal about how he couldn't take her virginity because it's like this big deal. And then in the second one, they just drop it and they're like, "Oh, we figured out a way around it." And you're like you made such a big deal out of it, and then you're just gonna do that. It's like they make a big plot point, but then it's like they need to push the story, so they just completely drop it. And they're like, "Yeah, we're past that now. Here's this other new thing." But for the most part, I liked it for what it is. The storyline's actually fairly interesting. Like the magic is kind of fading out from the world, and vampires and witches kind of commingle during the solstices to try to get together with each other to have babies in order to try and keep their magical lineage going. And it's just a really interesting concept, but because she's human, there's like a lot of conflict between her and the guy's family because the family wants him to, marry into magic. And they're like, the family line's dying, the bloodline's dying, because he's like a pureblood vampire, and they're all classist above like ones that are turned and all that stuff. And I don't know, it's actually fairly good and pretty interesting for like a smut novel. The direction of the third one though, I'm not sure if I like too much. There's like this plot point where the character isn't actually human. She's part something else, but I'm not gonna spoil it. And apparently that's why his mom was such a bitch to her, because she's like, "Oh, I knew she was this thing," but it's like instead of saying something, she's just tried to wreck their relation through the whole first three books. And it's just like, um but I guess it kind of makes sense because you gotta make the drama and make it worth reading somehow. But yeah, so that's kind of everything I've read this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought of any of these books, if you've read any of them, what your thoughts and opinions on them are, if there's any you want to pick up, or if I've changed your mind on any of the ones you've thought about reading. Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!